Welcome. This is the School District of Prescott Board of Education regular meeting. I'll call this meeting to order. Subject Section 1983 Wisconsin State Statutes. Our first item is to adopt the agenda. Rick, is there any changes?
No changes from administration.
Okay. We'll need a motion.
I'll move to adopt the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Next item is Pledge of Allegiance. Pat, you want to lead us?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move on. Next item is recognition of visitors. During the public comment section, attendees shall approach the podium one at a time and state their name, municipality, and residence and topic they are intended to address. A lot of time shall be a maximum of 3 minutes per individual, 6 minutes if that individual is speaking for a group. Participants shall direct all comments to the board and not to staff or other participants. The board will not act on any comments that are made during the meeting and do not relate directly to an agenda item for the meeting. The presiding officer may also direct the district administrator to follow up with the individual at a later date in a timely manner, and the public comment section of the meeting will be limited to no more than 30 minutes. For more information, please refer to our policy 167.3. So if anybody would like to address the board, please come up now. Anyone? All right. Okay, we'll move on. Good news.
I'm going to ask my two administrators that are here if they would approach, so from the high school. And then just to give you an update that we also are having parent or family conferences with our other staff, and the other administrators will be arriving at the end point of those sessions. I do have some other information to share on their behalf, so just remember to set that back for Sue and me at the end.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
So I was given good news from both the middle school and the intermediate school too, so I'm going to share theirs as well as my own. In terms of the middle school, Mr. Igo says, big congratulations to the middle school band. Their hard work over the past 2 months with a new teacher was on full display last night at the middle school band concert, and well done to all involved. Next Tuesday, come out and enjoy the first middle school choir concert of the year. The parent-teacher conferences for the middle school are tomorrow evening. They are also tomorrow evening for the high school as well, from 4 to 8 o'clock. So we'll welcome any and all parents in. And if you bring your kids, that's even better. And next week, the middle school will be celebrating Red Ribbon Week. That's a tongue twister. We'll have a lot of great learning activities we will be doing to promote living drug-free. In addition, at the intermediate school, number one, Drama-Rama is underway at the intermediate school. We have 2 teams that will be competing against 4 other schools at the Drama-Rama Festival on November 4th in Prescott. The Drama-Rama 5th grade team is coached by Jackie Montreal and includes the students Lila Montreal, Isabel Robertson, Joseph Swanson, Penelope Heiniger, Lucy Gruntner, and the 5th grade team will be performing the Bremen Town Musicians at the Drama-Rama Festival on November 4th. The Drama-Rama 4th grade team is coached by Veronica Justin and includes Alpha Justin, Reagan Martin, Jillian Kanapaki, thank you. Sierra Johnson, Sophia Urbano, Jessica Overland, Danny Nelson, and Aspen Whitcomb. The 4th grade team will be performing The Care and Feeding of a Dragon at the Drama-Rama Festival November 4th. The intermediate school is finally also really excited to announce they completed the Future is in Our Hands mural in the cafeteria. This mural contains the handprints of all students and staff at the intermediate school and is on display for anybody who happens to make it into the intermediate school.
And anybody in the listening audience will see it up on the presentation as
and
well.
There it goes right there. I couldn't have timed it better. It's a talented mind.
Oh, that's cool.
All right, at the high school, a big shout out to our students, our student council for hosting homecoming week a couple weeks ago. It was a big success. We saw a lot of student involvement. And then to our National Honor Society having their first and hosting their first Red Cross blood drive just this past week. We have parent-teacher conferences coming up tomorrow night, and so we're excited that we are officially at the mid-trimester of our first try in the year, and it's been very, very successful for our kids so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Figge. Rick Montreal.
Good evening, Board. Last year, at the beginning of the, beginning of the year, we implemented an initiative called Student of the Week. We rolled it out at an in-service in the beginning during Data Dig, trying to promote and celebrate student achievements that we knew were happening in the hallways of our building. And while that was a pilot last year, it kind of grew, and before we knew it, we had PLC teams that had billboards and had bulletin boards and had posters up to highlight these students that they were naming Students of the Week every week. Roll over to this year, and it's taken off even a little bit more, I feel like. It's a program that really does get to celebrate and highlight a lot of the great things we have going on in our building. So while I didn't mention it last year, I just would like to celebrate that and keep acknowledging the good things that are happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Sandy Strand, our Director of Student Services.
Thank you, Dr. Spacuzza, members of our board. Our good news tonight from Student Services comes from our nursing department. Our nursing department has finished their vision and hearing screenings for grades 4K, kindergarten, 1 and 3 for hearing, and they've done vision screening for grades 3, 5, and 9. That's a lot of work and a lot of kids. Immunization reporting will be done shortly. We are waiting on 2 extension waivers, and then we'll be at 100% compliance, just like we were last year for immunizations in the district. Our DTaP and flu shots are scheduled for 11/26/23 for anyone in grades 4K through 12th grade, and our flu and COVID vaccines will be available for staff on the 27th of November. So thank you.
Thank you. And from a superintendent perspective, there are an update that we just heard from Northwest Journey Counseling and Guidance is that they have formally hired the new director that will be taking over the program that we're partnering with that will kick off in January, that will be located at the lower level of the intermediate school. Very excited for that, and already now that we have that director hired, that individual and her team is an individual that has worked with Northwest Journey for a number of years, and we'll set up a transition team with Sandy and Michael Kosmowski, who's the principal, and the staff over there. So very excited about that news.
All right. Thanks, Rick. We'll move on to school business. First item is the consent agenda. We have a laundry list in here, so I'll go through it. In the consent, we have the September 20th, 2023 regular board minutes, board checks and finance, non-licensed personnel retirement resignation, employment change of non-licensed staff, removing executive assistant Maria Damiani from verbiage in PSD Neola school board policies, accept Neola technical updates and changes, aka Tier 1, version 32.2, for the following board policies per district administrator's responsibility. And lastly, accept the following Neola updates and changes, aka Tier 2, related to rescinding or merging previously approved board policies or include non-controversial changes. There's a lot of policies in here. If anybody has any questions or if they want to pull anything out, please, now would be the time. Is there anything that anybody in the board would like to pull out?
Mike, I got just one comment, though. I don't want to pull it out right now, but I would ask that in the near future we could take a look at, which policy is it here? The incapacity of district administrator, and have a discussion on that in the future.
Policy 1260.
Policy 1260.
Number 7, Rick? Just make
Correct.
note of that.
Yep.
Okay.
Courtney, you got that? 1260.
Number 7 on item 6. All right. Nobody wants to pull anything out. I will adopt the consent agenda. Adopt it. Are there any objections?
No.
Consent is adopted. Thank you. Move on to item B, consider retirement, resignation, new hires of licensed staff. There's no retirements and no resignations, no new hires.
Is that accurate?
Correct?
Yes.
All right, that was easy. Move on to item C. Consider to adopt a resolution authorizing a taxable tax and revenue anticipation.
Yes, I'm going to have our Director of Finance come forward. She has pulled the information together, and this is a line of credit that we do on an annual basis, but it does require a lot of paperwork, but also some explanation. So welcome, Sue.
Okay.
For the consent? Oh,
There's no motion to be made, so we're good.
Yep. Okay, Sue, you're up.
Okay, so commonly referred to as our line of credit. This line of credit is for $1 million, and it is our safety net. A large number of school districts have a line of credit, and the main purpose is the expenditures go out in a fairly steady stream, but the state aid payments ebb and flow. They come quarterly, and sometimes there's a lag time if there's a government shutdown, and so forth. So we keep this line of credit as a protection to keep us in the black during those times. This year, with our slightly declining fund balance, there's probably a little bit higher chance that we might actually use it. Otherwise, we have not used it in more than 5 years. We just keep it as a safety net.
Pat, any questions here?
No questions.
Ty?
No questions.
Vicki?
Nope.
None?
Nope.
All right, I think pretty standard here. Thanks. Sue?
welcome.
We'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to adopt the resolution authorizing opening the line of credit with First National Bank River Falls not to exceed $1 million.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That one carries. Next item is board adoption of fiscal year 2024 levy for $10,351,998.
Correct. So this is post the annual meeting. Sue and I, as you are aware, that we presented the first view of the budget last month. We then also held an annual meeting of the electorate, and that was held here. We have also posted the publication of the adoption that will be coming forward in the Pierce County Journal, and that it also is been updated with regards to the numbers. As you recall, at the bottom of the slide is that on October 15th, the equalization aid is released to all districts at the same time. We did learn that we did get an adjustment, a little bit of a haircut with regards to the amount of money that'll be coming from the state. Prior to that, we already knew that we were going to be decreased by about $435,000 just in appropriations. Now, what that means, again, is just it is still based on the levy limit that you're allowed to access. It just means what proportion is covered by the state and what proportion is covered by our local taxpayers. The information has also been posted to the district website under the school board where the agendas and minutes are posted, and that's been out for the same amount of time as the agenda. Given that we've gone through all of this information numerous times, there really hasn't been significant changes other than what we'll clarify with regards to equalization that came out, and then our third Friday count. With regards to every school district is required to take and report the number of butts and seats with regards to the enrollment. This year we have recorded 1,310 students. We are funded on a rolling 3-year average, and so you can see that from 2021 to now, our overall enrollment has slightly decreased. We were funded last year on the top row for 1,327 students. So this year, we will be funded on 5 fewer students than we were a year ago, with the average reimbursement to the public schools at $11,000. That automatically drops our overall revenue by $55,000. Couple things to point out is, given that it is a rolling average, next year for our finances will be based, and I know we're going to talk about this more in info and discussion, so just kind of planting the seed, is that 2021 will roll off, and that has the largest enrollment. So it is, we should unfortunately see that we will have a lower full-time enrollment for funding 2025, because it'll be the average of 1,305, 1,310, and whatever enrollment we have for next year. So we are, what I would say, based on predictions and our grade level retention, we are not seeing a major shift in any funding coming based on fixed amounts that come from per pupil aid. Then the next is kind of understanding our mill rate. And our mill rate is the proportion of taxes that are paid by our taxpayers. And it's broken into 2 categories. The first category is based on 2 types of referendum. From 2018, when we did the energy efficiency levy, that went into your Fund 38. That Fund 38 helped us put in new chillers and air handler units at what is now the middle school, and also upgraded 75% of the elementary. The new referendum, which is the $15 million to go into infrastructure, was voter approved. Both of those are the purple band, may play out different on your monitors, but that's the proportion, and you can see that that has become slightly thinner. That is the amount of principal and interest that is being paid overall. The gray area is the total amount of the mill rate that is going to pay for operations of our schools. So you can see the overall $10,300,000 levy that we're asking tonight is a combination of operations, the gray, and voter-approved referendum. And you can see that since 2017, there's a step-down progression on the proportion of taxes that are being paid. Kind of in a different way, you can see that there has been and continues to be a precipitous drop in the mill rate. Again, the proportion, we've gone back to 2015, and you can see how that has come out. It does not account for the overall assessed value of homes, and that comes out across the 5 municipalities. We do know that Oak Grove and Prescott are the 2 largest municipalities, and they pay the largest proportion of the $10 million levy. What we do know is that what will be paid is now going to be $7.70 per thousand. You multiply it by 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, and in general, you get an estimate of what your taxes would be. Obviously, it plays out then depending on the municipality you live in. What I did want to share is that the impact on our local taxpayers from 2018 through 2024, if you look at it, in 2018, our taxpayers were paying about $6.6 million of the overall levy. And that has kind of then hovered right around the trend line. The trend line isn't exactly flat. It does have a downward trend, but our local taxpayers are paying $865,257,000 across the 5 municipalities, less dollars to the Prescott Public Schools than they were in 2018. That just means that the state has taken some steps in trying to elevate their overall costs and also put that into either taxpayer relief or to Prescott Public Schools and obviously the other public schools in the state. So I will turn it over now to Sue. This will walk you through. The main thing we want you to focus on is that it is a 3-year look. This is the final, and these are the final numbers that came in and were and will be submitted to DPI and then ultimately to each county clerk. It does say audited, unaudited, and budgeted. Main thing about unaudited is the audit started in July. We can't change that language until you receive the final audit. That is not uncommon. And it is required by Clifton Larson Allen to submit that to DBI by, I think, no later than December. There's a certain date, but you also will see it prior to. If there was any substantive concerns, both the board chair or president and the superintendent would have been notified. I have not been notified, and I believe Mike has not been notified. So it's just more about the timelines. So with that, Sue, do you want to walk through the specific lines and
Sure.
any changes from the annual meeting?
Sure, so maybe starting from the bottom up, line 75 is our community service fund, which is comprised of two things, community education and community recreation. And it's got a very slight increase to it, as you can see. And then working our way up is the non-referendum debt, which is the energy efficiency improvements. And these numbers are following the debt schedules issued by the banks or the bondholders. Same with the referendum approved, voter approved debt service fund. You'll see this year is up slightly. Most of it primarily follows the debt schedules. There's a small amount in there to cover excess debt. Is that how you phrase that, excess debt? Mm-hmm. So the big one that everybody focuses on is the general fund. And the general fund is everything else that we do. It's our operating fund. And you'll see in 21, 22 is almost the same as this current year, but the middle year it kind of drops off. And that's what Rick was referring to when he said the state aid changed. The state aid drops, our proportion goes up because your equalization value is the total of both. And so if the state's going to contribute less, the local taxpayers contribute more. And that does swing back and forth. Our total does not change as a rule. It just shifts between state and local.
Can I ask a question? Yep. Sue, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So looking at the next year, 24-25 for general fund, so we're getting 0% from the state increase. So will
Right.
that general fund, all other things being equal, will that be the same number as for next year too?
If things, no, because the student count we're
Minus the
predicting
student
is
count,
gonna
yeah,
drop.
okay, right.
So then
So-
the state portion will, or the calculation in total will drop.
All things being equal, let's just say we have the same amount of students, and we know it's going to drop, but for the sake of this, that number
Yeah.
stays the
Well,
same.
We're
There-
predicting the percentages likely will, but the state changes the calculations all the time.
But, and I do want to clarify, so we came out of a biennium with no additional per pupil funding. Next year, it is scheduled that we will receive another 325 per pupil. We were hoping
Okay.
to see 650 and 650. We got 50 cents on the dollar.
Because of the 22-23 shortage that we have on here, that's why we have the gap. I mean, is that fair
Correct.
to say?
Right.
Yeah, the loss of the ARPA funds was a big factor.
Okay.
We're not, nobody knows what consumer price index is proposed for, what it will do next year. If the 325 will keep it level or if our gap will grow, remains to be seen.
Okay.
But again, remind, that 325 for next year, though, that still has to be levied from the taxpayers. The
Yes.
state isn't giving that to us. That
No.
we have the ability
We
to
have
tax our
levy
community
it,
for
and
that much more per pupil.
Yep, that's a really good clarifying question. So the added per pupil funds then breaks out, if you levy for it, the proportion that the state will pay and then the proportion that your local people pay.
Yep.
Any other questions for Sue?
Melanie, any questions? Vicki? Nope. Anybody else down here?
Maybe Captain Obvious stuff here, but, so Rick, a couple of slides ago, we said that the mill rate dropping equals taxpayers' portion of the school, right, has gone down, meaning the state is picking up additional, but that additional that the state is picking up has not been and is not projected to be in line with cost increases and inflation. That is correct, right?
That's accurate.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
And just for an example, last year, the state amount of equalization aid was 9.2 million. This year, we're getting 8.8. Okay, so that's a 4% drop that then gets passed on to local community. But even with that, you can see that it has been relatively stable, but it is an increase, obviously, and so it's an increase of 6% based on all these numbers coming together. Our goal, and we'll talk about this in information discussion, is that we do believe, last year we were very close to coming back in front of you to pay off some current bonds. The purpose and rationale of that is that it saves taxpayers additional dollars because we're no longer having to pay interest. And so that is some of the benefits that we're trying to work on heading into the new year.
Yeah, last year's amount would have been, we thought we would save $150,000 in interest expense.
Yeah. So, just correct me if I'm wrong here, because I want to make sure I got my talking points right here. Expenses, right, they've been relatively flat here for the last couple of years. I know it's give or take a few 100,000 maybe, but it's been over the last 3 years, relatively flat expenses. Our revenue has decreased by roughly $1 million. $1.2 million of revenue has decreased by that much, and that's largely due to state funding and ESSER dollars dropping off, right?
Exactly.
And then the last point I wanted to make was the mill rate, because this one needs to get at least advertised. You look at just go back 10 years ago and look at where the mill rate started and where it is now. It's dropped $4.50 per $1,000, which equates to about $450 per $100,000 on your house value. So taxes the mill rate of the school district has dropped. I mean, that's pretty significant. That's almost $500 on a $100,000 house. So I think those points I want to just point them out as talking points as we go through the rest of the year, and we have other items on the agenda to talk about the budget gap, so I'll save it for that. But did I get that right?
You did.
All right. Anything else?
No, I think you hit the revenue from last year is coming in from federal and state is $1 million less than a year ago. In 2021, we received 17.9, and we're now down to 16.7. Our expenses have been pretty stable as well, and so those are the things that we try to contain, but there are certain things that we, obviously, if you want to be able to retain staff, be able to make sure they have the resources they need to get the performance and programs that our community expects, that is really hard, but we have, and our expenses are lower than they were a year ago.
All right, anything else, board? So we're here to make a motion to adopt the levy.
Correct.
And we have the language on the working agenda here. So if somebody would like to make that motion, go for it.
I move to approve adoption of the fiscal year 2023 annual budget as presented with an overall local levy of $10,351,998.
I've got a question. The 10,351 doesn't match the 10,350. We're off $1,000 there.
Which one do we type wrong?
You have in the agenda, it's 10,351. The slide says 10,350.
Oh, I have the actual.
Good catch.
one right here.
Do we know which one it is? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess, it's, the one I printed today says 10,350,
Yeah.
998. Oh, yeah, that one.
10,350, 998.
Yep.
Okay.
And then,
And it's 2024.
yeah, I was going to say it says 2023 in here, but it's 2024.
23, 24.
Let's do that again.
So that motion will die. Go ahead, Tanya.
I move to approve adoption of fiscal year 2024 annual budget as presented with an overall local levy of $10,350,998.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. All right, thank you. Thanks, Sue.
You're
We'll move
welcome.
on to item E, approve updated edits to the employee handbook for the 23-24 school year.
Yes. So I wanted to be really clear and start off with an apology, both publicly and on the record. Anything that happens outside of the district office and under my management is ultimately my responsibility. We did, on a regular basis, handbooks are updated in kind of the summer months and move forward. Sometimes you have to go slow to go fast, and it is very unfortunate for all the things that we're asking our staff to do, to expect that we could also have handbooks out among our staff for them to review and also to be ready to sign off on. That's on me. There is no and or but. And so I wanted to apologize both to the board, because I know it took additional efforts on your part, also to the staff who took time, and I think appropriately took time, to reach out and be here last month. But also, I would say that corrective steps were taken. And I believe part of the reason that you don't see a large group here is because of some of the steps that were taken. I do want to begin with the handbook changes of understanding what I do believe might have been a mismatch of expectations. And so, as you realize, the last time we did a major update, it was in the February of 2021. We did have a group and partnered with staff, and you have the slides from that, you had the presentation and the names of the staff that occurred at that time. Since that time, the owner of the handbook has been touched by, edited, Post-it notes, emails, or decisions. Just like a coach, just like a referee, ultimately they have to make interpretations of a playbook. And when they make interpretations, not everybody is going to be happy with those interpretations, but the ultimate goal is to make sure that we're working on clarity and fairness and norming to make sure that the application of a handbook across time is consistent. What we do know is since 2021, there have been decisions made, there have been edits, there have been clarifications, and new staff coming in. So we know that it was primarily the role of Deb Hooper, who had done this for more than 20 years. Then it went to Liz Roberts. Then it went to Amy Jo Johnson. Then to Angela DeZingle, Chantel Byram. And now it'll be in the hands of somebody else. The challenge, I think, is that we knew that as new people came in, as we met with our new staff, there were things that would befuddle the HR person, it would befuddle payroll, and befuddle Sue as they were trying to navigate in a normal case or a normal journey through decisions. My task, or working with Chantel, is that I took, sometimes they tell you, don't just talk, show, is I handed her, you've seen my office, right? I handed her these documents, and you'll see that there are Post-it notes, there are letters, there are emails, and there are different drafts. We basically asked her over the summer to go through and clean up everything that she could to make sure that operating under rights, so that, not so much so that you can be so that you can be understood, such that you can't be misunderstood. That was the work that she was charged with. It wasn't about negotiating or changing any major substantive parts of it. It was to get clarity. We know that periodically the board has assigned, and we've done that back in 2016, we did it in 2018, and we did it in 2021. I see no reason why we would stop that practice, but at this point, the task wasn't to negotiate or change any major things. It was all about balancing and making sure that we were back to baseline, that we could own it. I do know that, like I said, missteps, leadership is not a committee of one, culture is not a committee of one, but boy, decisions of one can really throw or shoot ourselves in the foot. And so again, I just want to apologize. Here are the steps that we took since last month. We set up meetings with every single staff, but prior to meeting with staff, we asked each principal to set up a survey. The survey was to ask for any questions or clarifications with regards to the handbook that had been put out. We made sure that a colorized version, so just like the Neola policies, you could see all the edits and things like that that were there. We did have to print them. Basically, we relived the software issues that we were navigating. And then we generated a 5-page frequently asked questions that came forward. From those frequently asked questions, I do want to be clear that they were generated primarily from 7 respondents. It's still important, and every single one of those questions were answered face-to-face, both with a staff member from each building, then with the invitation, and we started with the middle school. We held that after school, and we have participants not only from the middle school, but from other schools that were there as well. The next meeting was then, we started on a Tuesday. We went on Wednesday. We met with Malone Elementary and the intermediate school. Both faculties were together, as well as some other members within our district. And then I followed up with another staff member and went through all of the frequently asked questions one by one. From those 2 events, if there were any questions or clarifications, we then came to the high school. We met for 2 hours during the schedule in which staff are provided a duty-free lunch. They came in and we had conversations, sat down, we broke bread, and we were able to kind of walk through the different items. From there, I do want to be clear is that there is never a perfect agreement or satisfaction with an employee handbook. However, the intent was just to get the language back to a baseline where everybody understood. There have been errors and omissions that have occurred, and yet there have been practices and protocols that continue to follow. The 4 biggest challenges go back to identifying the workday. Our licensed staff have a different workday than the district office. They have a different set of workday hours from our administrative assistants and our custodians. Those 3 groups work a full 8 hours and then an unpaid lunch of 30 minutes. Licensed staff have an 8-hour day with 30 minutes duty-free. So the majority of their contact is with students is 7.5 hours, and then they have the 30-minute deduct. The language in the handbook, however, read, since 2021, that the workday excluded a duty-free lunch. I asked every single principal whether or not they were removing the lunch period from any staff member. They answered negative. I asked every single group that met with us and Chantel about whether or not they knew of any instance where we were excluding that, and they all answered they did not. We are recommending, even though the board approved a handbook that said excludes, we believe the intent, when it was edited, meant to say includes. And so that is one thing that we are putting forward that is different that you saw previously, but I think is in the spirit, one, of how we have practiced, how we run protocols, and how payroll has been working. It is likely human error. We've gone back all the way to 2017, and it still had that language. There are notes and things like that, I can tell you, but I would say that the spirit of the intent was not to change it, and I do believe that it is important to change, and it would be aligned with our practice. The other thing that came up is specific to language that I think gets maybe convoluted with regards to a change that happened from another board in 2016 that ended payment for health care in retirement. At this time, we are proposing, based on the language that was spoken to and you heard last month from our staff, as well as in the frequently asked questions, to revert language that specifically says at volunteer retirement. The thing that does still stay in the language is twofold, is that the maximum amount of payment for voluntary retirees identified in Tier 1 is a maximum of 5 years, and it stays at 2016. Again, we are just getting back to the language of what was specifically in the handbook, and so that remains, but all references to 60 has not been put in, but rather just voluntary retirement. So all of the OPEB, kind of the optional post-employment benefits, are tied to when an individual voluntarily retires. The only difference where an age stays in, and this goes back to 2016, and this is referenced in Appendix B, and that's support staff, is that they do receive, if they have 15 years of service within the Prescott Public Schools and retire at age 57, again, this language has been consistent since 2016, therefore we're not recommending a change, is that they receive $250 per month. That runs for a maximum of, I think, 3 years. The other one is a sick day payout. That was regards, and I think very important, is that intent has always been a post-retirement benefit. That post-retirement benefit is reported on a report to Hildy that does an external audit of all your liabilities with regards to post-retirement employment, and that is what helps set your Moody ratings. That's why and how you get preferred ratings with regards to how you manage your budget, what your debt service load is, as well as what your investments are for individuals, or in an accounting phrase, the liabilities that you have on your books. The sick day payout was confusing because it had two different words in a 3 or 4 sentence paragraph. It said at time of leave, and then the last sentence said at volunteer retirement. This language is very similar to Part B of the support staff, where they get $250 per month when they retire, and the sick day payout has always been interpreted by payroll, interpreted by finance, and interpreted by previous HR directors at time of retirement. Therefore, we're not asking for any change to that, but we are basically making sure that the first and last sentence both read similarly so that you can't misconstrue that. Lastly is personal day. This one is probably the one that received some conversation from the board. I want to start with that the personal day has always had blackout dates. You have an older version, I believe, starting with Helen and Vicki from 2018, a 2019, a 2021 by Mike. The language was also in a summary that was given to the board when we made the first attempt for staff not to have to pay for a substitute teacher. Then we also went to paying out for unused personal days. And so that summary had been presented to the board, and there were, that information was in there. We believe that it was a cut and paste error. All I can tell you is that the personal day dropped off in the final version of 2021, but since then was consistently run by the principals as part of the protocol of blackout dates. It was interpreted by payroll as still in vogue. And all we're asking for is that, similarly to the human error on whether or not you include or exclude a duty-free lunch, is that the personal days would remain with those sentences about blackout dates, that when parent-teacher conferences are in place or holidays are there, is that those days are blacked out. I can share with you that other districts also have the first and last month that personal days can't be used. This is a dilemma that the public schools are faced with currently, is that there is a dearth of substitute teachers available. We currently, every single administrator, similarly, is covering classes and uncovered classes within each week since we started school. And I think it would be very difficult for us to be opening up additional times where you would prescribe a staff member to be gone in some of these dates that already have individuals that we are on, when we already have a short bench in order to be able to cover that. If it is of interest of the board, I'm happy to take that direction and would just ask that when we have a HR person, that could be something that is looked at and options brought back. But we didn't think we were prepared at this time to go beyond that. So overall, I'm trying to basically share with you is that we did make an attempt to gather information both in a survey. We collected frequently asked questions. We met face-to-face. I can share with you that there was things that came up, for example, on the extracurricular payment scale with regards to the theater director, that the two middle school theater coaches asked for language change for that stipend. That's $5,100. There were questions about, is it paid per term? And the answer is yes. So those are edits that were added. We also found, and I met with Community Ed with regards to Destination Imagination. Destination Imagination is still a program that exists. It was moved to Community Ed a few years ago. As you know, we just approved a budget where one of the things that we did is that we took middle school athletics and moved it to PCR. Both of those are in Fund 80. We have learned that we cannot cross-subsidize Fund 80. And that is part of why we had to increase the Fund 80 levy by about $25,000, is just to make sure that we're covering the staff salaries, the staff benefits, and also additional costs for the coaches who cover middle school. Because we can't cross-subsidize, there was some confusion about whether or not the program was nixed. The program is not nixed. It does have a team that is going to be going and participating, and the stipend is there. We added a footnote. It does not appear on your copy because the footnote was added after the conversation. Mr. Igo participated. I participated. All it is making sure that there's an understanding with finance that the stipend still exists, but it has to come out of Fund 80. It can't come out of Fund 10. It's a lot of discussion about a $1,000 stipend, but I just wanted to make sure that you were clear that, one, when people have questions, and I mentioned this at all three schools with the faculty, our goal wasn't in any way to change anything in a substantive way. After this is published, finally, know that a clean copy was sent to all staff as well. If there are any questions that come up, our goal is to meet with them, with the administrator or supervisor, to make sure that we clear it up. Because if for some reason, in all of these translations, now that Chantel's not here, our goal is to make sure that it matches. And so they can always bring that forward, and that's where the best and most response can occur would be in the district office. And then if it is something that is about a programmatic change or something that's more significant, we would take it under advisement under the regular negotiations or partnerships that we have with the faculty. So with that, again, I apologize that it created disruption to the beginning of the school. I take complete ownership for it. We will go slower next time. I do believe that the steps that were taken are the steps that we need to take, and we will continue to do that under a continuous improvement. And with that, any questions?
Tanya, you want to start us?
Yeah, I can start us. Yeah, the handbook thing, I appreciate the recognition that maybe it wasn't our best rollout of the handbook, and I appreciate the recognition that we want to get back to kind of that partnering and having conversations with staff and stuff like that. So that's really important, and I think it's really important for transparency as well. We did meet, was it last week maybe, and had kind of a conversation specifically about the handbook and...
Meaning me?
Me, you, yep. Sorry, I'll clarify. Mike, myself, and Rick met last week, and one of the things that came up or that we were purposely meeting on was clarifying some of the differences in the handbook language and how did we get to this place where we had some really different understandings and stuff like that. So, Rick, at that time you had shared your belief that, we kind of had these different handbooks in play and there's all these different hands in there and some things were inadvertently left off or even added, it kind of went both ways. So I did a little bit of homework, and your binder or your folder is really big, and that's how I felt with my Google Drive. But I would say that I understand and see what you're saying. So I appreciate you brought, I think, 3 different versions of the handbook. I also went back. I can see all the way up to, I think it was like 2019 was the last time that I saw the language, and I'm going to talk specifically about the language for the blackout dates, that language was within that handbook. I believe it was 2019 was the last time I really saw it on there, maybe 2020. And then I looked back to see, okay, what have we approved along our agendas in relation to that? And in 2020, we did have a language change, but it was only related to furloughs and layoffs. It didn't relate to that. So I do see where it looks like there's this whole section when you compare the handbooks that looks to be left off. And we probably need to put it back on. And so I understand that the purpose here is just to kind of clarify and get to a place where we're really combing through what was approved, what was not approved. But I personally would be interested in seeing a conversation once HR's on board, once kind of the year's rolling. So at least at a minimum for next year, we're having a language with those blackout days. I understand. I definitely understand the lack of substitutes and stuff, so I would be interested in looking at how do we, for any day, really kind of justify how many people can be gone within a day. I actually do think the handbook says 2 people, or did at one point, so I don't really have questions. I think I'll just say I think it's been really confusing, kind of following those breadcrumbs for me. But I would like to see that we have those conversations along that. Specifically with the the blackout days.
Thanks, Tanya. Pat?
Similar to Tanya, I'm not going to repeat it. A question on the blackout dates, or personal days in general. When personal days are asked for, what's the approval process per building?
It basically is run by the principal. They do have the ability to deny. Rarely does that happen, but do any of you want to speak to how that happens? The blackout dates really were specific to, unless there's an emergency, there are times where we know that we need our staff, our best and our frontline teachers to be there, and it becomes difficult when you're one, parent-teacher conferences, right? The part of our role is to engage and be able to have that conversation with families. And to have a key person not there when families are already kind of coming, not to have a frontline staff there would be, I think,
No, I
a
get it.
difficulty.
I understand the hardship. If somebody's going to use a personal day, what's the expectation? I guess I'm just looking at you guys because you guys are here, putting you on the spot. What's the expectation for notice? What's the protocol for applying for a personal day? And then is there a formal approval process of that?
So at the high school, it's largely situational, but we're hoping ideally that we get 2 weeks' notice for personal day. We're immediately finding substitutes. Union heads are great at doing that. But we also understand that, you can't plan for everything. So we try to be ultra flexible. We've had instances where someone's got their personal day only days in advance. And most of the time, we're either finding a substitute from out of the district or we're covering internally with staff that are great at stepping up and helping out fellow colleagues and having that team.
Thanks.
The process is a verbal, preferably a verbal, I'm going to need this coming up. But then the formal process is they enter into Skyward and make a formal request, at which point the administrator either approves or denies it.
Okay, thank you.
And it's fairly uniform throughout all the buildings. And the short notice happens, and we just have to accept that.
When I was looking through the different handbooks, actually, is that this current one?
Yes.
Okay, so it does have like the approval section in there. And I do think like, I don't know if this is your point, Pat, so sorry for butting in, but for me with blackout days, to me that is kind of part of the point, is like how do we decide when we deny or when we don't deny, and how can we make that more uniformed, right?
Yes.
And so like when I brought up before, like maybe there's just a percentage of staff, and then that's that. It's not, there's no personal anything else in there, right? And I think that would be really handy or a good place to put it in that approval process section.
Right. So that's it for questions from me right now.
Vicki? Anything else? Helen, you got any questions or comments?
My one question was reviewing all this, and I missed the meeting, sorry, because I was sick, but my question would be to have a further discussion on those Tier 1 employees and the fact that, like, looking at it, it looks like the language states that goes back to 2016 agreement. And especially because, correct me if I'm wrong, because it happens a lot, we don't offer an HRA in this district, right, which is a retirement account, right, for those.
No, we have a HSA, a health savings
Yep.
account, and also a 403B match.
Okay, but not an HRA. So I would like to have more conversation about, because when I read this, it kind of, longevity seems to be, I don't want to say punished, but kind of like, well, this is when it breaks. And I know that fiscally we have things to discuss, but I think there's ways to have that conversation.
Yeah, just for the record, that was board approved in 2016.
2016, yep.
When we switched over. So we did have that discussion at that time. If you want to talk about it and get some background on it, I think we can do that, Rick, maybe, and talk it through. But that was a board approved decision in 2016, just for the record.
So question, what's the adopted, help me with this, adopted by the school board in 9/21/21? So what is the adoption? We just, right here on the, it's like A6, I have it pulled up right now. It just says that it was approved, and then it says adopted by school board 9/21/21.
That's just a summary for the board of the changes that went out to, I believe, staff and was part of HR to update their.
Back in 21.
So it was approved in the 2016, and then it was adopted again in the 2021?
I think, is it kind of, I'm not sure, but I believe that it's kind of like what we're doing right now, is every year we look back at the handbook and just adopt it to kind of roll forward. There's normally not updates. I think the last time, and there was some of our staff member on that committee, that 2019, right? There was kind of a committee that updated it, but normally we just look at it, review it, and put it back into place. So it's just
Sure.
kind of approved through a board action.
Okay.
Every year.
Yeah. And that's how I went back, and anybody can do this because these notes are online, but I went back to the agendas and looked at every year right around September when we approved the handbook again for the year. And it says if there was different things, like in 2020 it was furloughs and layoffs was kind of like the substantive change maybe. Other than that, yeah, it hasn't been for a long time.
Okay. So
But that's a way to look.
Stating this, it says it's fixed at the 2015, 2016 employer contribution, can't talk today, contribution rate. So that was locked in at that 2016.
Yes, that was part of the agreement at the time.
Okay.
So, first of all, the process over the last month, I mean, I know it's spent a lot of time and energy for a lot of different people, so I appreciate everybody's contributions, because it takes a lot of time to do this, and it's an important thing to get right. It's never going to be 100% right, and it's never going to be 100% agreed upon. My question, Rick, might be, as the year goes on, maybe this is how it goes every year, but there's always going to be discrepancies that need to be interpreted. How does that get handled? We don't have an HR director right now. Who can the faculty go to for questions and help?
Yeah, so basically they follow, again, it would depend on what the issue is, right? So I can't think of everything, but I would say, we start with our policies. It's your supervisor's the first call for help. The supervisor can help interpret that. And then if it has to, in the meantime, it would come to me, and then I would work, depending on if it's a payroll issue, a finance, a leave, we would work with the individual. There is always a grievance process. That grievance process is both part of a policy and part of your handbook, and that could be followed. Typically, most of these things are worked out and resolved at an administrative level.
So we approve this tonight. Somebody finds something in the handbook that doesn't jive with what things used to be like. Is that something that gets just managed?
I would ask them, I think that would be the easiest. We would take kind of all these documents and try to make sure that anything that's been changed or updated is accurate.
Okay.
And, we have not received any follow-up or queries since the frequently asked questions went out. The copy of this document went out to all staff. There are some topics that I shared with you that that Tier 1 has asked, and we've mentioned that a couple times. I think you need to put that in perspective of the finances and how that's for information and discussion, because that's where it belongs.
Okay, so handbook gets approved. Any changes? I mean, we typically do it in the summer, so the blackout's a good example. We would maybe tee that up for summer discussion and see if we can come up with a better approach for that. And if there's anything else throughout the year, teachers bring it up, and our folks that need or use the handbook bring it up, and that gets discussed, and hopefully.
Yeah, and as an example, our aides had talked to us about snow days last year. We were able to meet with them, we talked with them, we brought to you a proposal, and that was dealt with, and that's a pilot year. If it ultimately is both financially stable and also works out, we'll then make it part of the permanent handbook. Very similar to the personal day payouts. The teachers, we started that as a pilot. They have the ability to, if they don't use their personal days, they are able to be compensated for $100 per those days. And that still remains, and it is part of the handbook.
All right, yeah, and I'll back up. Last month, I know we got some board members, including myself, got some feedback on the handbook, and I think we did the right thing last month by pushing it off a month. I haven't heard any feedback since then, and I'm hoping that's a good thing. I guess we're prepared to probably approve it right now, and then we're going to move on, and hopefully, this is going to be an ongoing, it's a living document. I think hopefully everybody understands that, and we're just trying to make it better, so.
I guess for me, in full transparency, I am concerned when we're going back like 5 handbooks and pulling back paragraphs and languages, so I just want, in full transparency, moving forward, next year when we're at this place, like, this is the handbook I'm working off of. I'm like kind of not interested in, and I totally get it, but like, there's no more leaving things off. Like, I am operating on this handbook,
The administration would appreciate that.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And then, like, if there are things that were inadvertently left off,
add 'em
we had
back
approved
next
this, then we're going to have to redo the conversations in the summer and stuff like we would for anything else.
I 100% agree. Okay.
And once this is approved, it's on like Infinite Campus for everyone to see.
Yeah, we'll make sure that, there's a last page that they will be asked to sign, that they both have received it. One of the changes that is there is that we move the page, I think, to the last page. Because it was in the middle of the document. I have no idea why it was there, but just, make sure everybody knows. There it is. Page 78 now says the employee acknowledgement is also then put into Skyward under online forms.
Perfect.
All right.
So
Anything
is that
else?
a process that's going to be happening now after our approval tonight?
Yep, as soon as
Okay.
I can figure out how to get somebody to put it in Skyward, yes.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, we can take a motion here.
I move to approve the employee handbook for the 2023-2024 school year.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Well done. Thank you. Thank you for everybody that helped with this. We really appreciate it and bringing it to our attention too. We'll move on to information and discussion. The first item is the update from the October 4 work session.
Yes, so it's been a busy month because this is our 4th meeting in 2 months, and that is atypical for us, but we are in atypical times. You understand that the budget that we have adopted and based on the levy that is occurring is that we are approving a budget that is unbalanced for the first time. With my tenure here, it is now the revenue that we receive versus expenditures is over $900,000 of a gap. We came in the work session kind of talking about 3 things. What can we do this year to either generate revenue? What are things that we can do to contain costs? And then to also start to talk about how do we make sure that we're able to retain both our staff, our programs, and the performance that I talked about in the introduction. And later today, you'll hear an update with regards to our academic performance that continues to do amazing things from our staff and students. So the challenge that we have is we are only going to be receiving another $325 per pupil. That, based on the amount of students, is likely to be lower than the number of students this year. So we already know that our cap will be lower. That is fixed. We can't change that. We have and do keep intense records with regards to grade level retention. We know exactly how many students are in 4K, what % of those students come in, and we average that over the last 12 years. Basically, it's plus or minus 12 students. We know that the amount of students projected for kindergarten next year is 60. When I started in 2015, we had 90 to 100 students per grade. When you start to have 60, you have to start to look at, one, the decrease in the overall amount of revenue that you have, but also you have to start to look at the ratio of students per classroom and how we work on that. We did have a discussion, so starting with the revenue, we did look at, and the administrative team had ideas. We've talked about online or charter schools. We've looked at and considered, obviously, some leases that we have currently. We do have a partnership with the YMCA. We have a partnership with Northwest Journey Counseling. But those are things that might bring in $20,000, $16,000. They pay for some of the utilities. But we're talking about, as we mentioned, elephants. And elephants have to be about $50,000. And we need 20 of them. You received one elephant by moving middle school athletics to Prescott Community Rec. And this budget that you adopted, in August, the gap was 1.3. We were able to shift and look at and reduce the amount of money that's going to sites. We looked at and are looking at cost containment with regards to travel. We're looking at cuts and restrictions on supplies. But at some point, we want to make sure that the staff that are here continue to have investments in professional development, that they have the supplies that they need to be able to thrive. And there aren't really any other revenue streams that we have other than the item that comes after that, and we'll talk about that with regards to property. And so there is some property that we'll talk about that might bring in some revenue. I did test the waters with regards to, can we use the fund balance to shore up that gap? At the time, it was 1.2 million. We're down to 9, and we'll continue to make, when people leave, we'll have discussions about are there different ways before we rehire to either repackage, redistribute the job and workload. There are some positions that are just required. You can't operate a bus fleet if you don't have a driver for each bus, right? It's really hard to run a business and deal with conflict and HR regulations and rules without an HR director. So those are some things that become essential positions, but we continue to look at that over time. We did talk about, revenue generation, but there's not a lot there other than the item that we'll follow up on. We did talk about cost avoidance. What I heard at this time is that obviously things that we can do, we should, but we also didn't want it to, like I said, curtail supporting people that are here. We do know that there are some fixed costs coming down the road, and that is with regards to healthcare. We have a cap for this year, and we have a cap into next year, but we're on the second year of a 3-year contract. Sue and I have had conversations. We believe that the next time we go up for healthcare renewal, that we should do a request for proposals to make sure that we're getting the best, accurate, most competitive bid. And we've been served extremely well by Health Partners. I know our staff are happy with that, but at some point we have to look at whether or not we can contain the costs. We also are exploring to get you information about becoming self-funded in healthcare. Some districts are doing it. It used to be something that larger districts would take on because of the liability. However, the secondary market, stopgap insurance, and circuit breakers are out there. Sue has been kind of monitoring from afar. In Chippewa Falls, there's a group that is having an ongoing conversation with districts that are interested in moving in that direction. The difficulty, I would say, with that is that there's nothing imminent. In order to get out of our contract with Health Partners early would not be beneficial because there's a huge penalty. So there isn't really anything about cost containment that are large numbers. And I heard that we wanted to make, the directive was to Sue and I, is to make sure that we could continue to retain people by making sure that salaries continue to increase and that benefits weren't cut. And so that is kind of the marching orders that we had. We hope to be able to start coming back to you with updates over the next few months. Sue and another colleague who assists in the accounting are participating in a Baird training that is in November. I think it's the 28th of November. One of the things I want to compliment them is that we have this very powerful tool. It will allow us to run scenarios for you, and our goal is to come back kind of mid-year and give you the opportunity to look at scenarios with regards to the $325 per pupil added based on the enrollment we think we will have, knowing all those factors so that you can kind of see where and what the gap would be. So with that, I think I would want to just kind of stop again, and we talked about revenue. There's not a lot that we can do there. We do and are taking, we're fully engaged both as administrators. We've asked our staff and we'll continue to ask our staff. My goal is to also have some listening sessions to find out if there's suggestions. No good idea is going to be left unexamined. And so we're hoping that there are ideas that can come forward on how we can look for more efficiencies within our sites. I can share with you that Mike Hoyka has worked with Train to do an audit, an energy audit. We do have energy efficiency in 2 of our buildings, but we are not taking full advantage. We've moved to LED lights, but we also have building automation systems that control the temperatures, whether or not they're occupied, which fans are on. And so we are looking at coming back to you with a proposal now that all 4 buildings will be on a similar platform due to the investment of $15 million, is to set up with a vendor to be able to guarantee that we would get more efficiencies in our heating and electrical use. And so I applaud him for that, and also for the principals who are starting to look at their programs and staffing. And every department will be asked to do a similar thing. So with that, all of you participated in it. You probably have some additional thoughts that I missed or that you wanted to accent, and I guess now would be the time.
Anybody want to go first on this one? Looking down here. Either you guys want any comments from the workshop or questions from that? Rick, kind of
Comments?
Takeaways? I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Sure, I can just, takeaways. Without, again, repeating everything that Dr. Spikuza just said, it's the fund balance is in great shape. That's why it's in great shape. We talk about Fund 46, the fund balance, the saving that the district has been able to do, is fantastic, and that is going to allow the current programming and the current personnel and the current levels of service to continue throughout this year. So, that is amazing, we're in great shape there. One of my takeaways is everything needs to be on the table, as we look into next year's budget, and that includes cost containment, that includes cost mitigation, and that includes additional, revenues, including potentially a discussion about a referendum for operations. It all has to be put on the table for people to consider, and eventually for full community input. That's what I got for right now.
Tanya, anything to add?
Yeah, just to add, this isn't a surprise, right? Rick has done a good job of informing us for a long time that something is coming and it's going to impact our budget pretty negatively. And so we're there. And I think the thing that helps me at least kind of wrap my head around this, right, is that we have done a really good job of savings and building up our fund balance and our Fund 46, so we can take a year or this year to really be purposeful and plan and decide what we're going to do in the spring and in the summer to make sure that our students are as minimally impacted in kind of their programming as we possibly can. And so that's the hard work of it, though, is, and I think we're going to have a conversation a little bit looking at some of our scores and all this great stuff too, is making sure that our kids are still continuing to get the really great education that they're getting, and still cut costs or figure out ways to bring money in. And so that probably will be the topic of every board meeting for, I would imagine, this whole year. So, yeah.
Vicki?
Yeah, we went over just about everything that we could. I know the principals are working hard at trying to figure out what they can change, what they can reduce, what they absolutely need, what they don't need. So they've been hard at work. And we're all trying, but yep, there is only so much out there, and Prescott, I think, has done a really great job of maintaining certain standards that we put out to the community. There's a reason our kids are doing as well as they are. There's a reason they're improving every year, and the scores show that. So we do have to have every option available to us, like Pat said. We have to look at all of our spending. We have to possibly make cuts, and we may have to come back to the community and ask for an operations referendum. We wouldn't be the only district that has needed to do that. Our state funding is not keeping up with what the kids in this state need. The hard part is we live right here on the river, so a lot of our news we get from Minnesota, and Minnesota sounds great. They've got all these other options to pull from. The state of Wisconsin doesn't operate like that. So I just want everyone in the public to be aware that we're going to try our best. Everybody in the administration is going to try their best, but that may be the final option. But like Tanya said, this is going to be probably discussed at every board meeting from here on out.
Yeah, just an echo statement. I mean, Prescott's not alone in this. Across the state, funding is not where it should be. Operational referendums are coming up in different districts. It has to happen. I would say, for me, looking at what was shown too, everything is on the table. That means we have to continue to look at enrollment, and if enrollment continues to go in the way we don't want it to and decline, we need to look at what we have in our district and how we can maybe change some things, or how we can better use some facilities that we have. So that would be the only thing for me. But I think the community, if you've been watching the news, you can see that funding statewide is not where it should be. So it's no shock.
Kenzie, anything?
Okay.
All right. From the meeting, I mean, it was pretty loud and clear. The board's stance was to use the fund balance this year. We built it up for this reason. We're going to use the fund balance. We're going to get through this year. We're not cutting anything. Next year, we can't do that. So we know we got to make some changes. Task the district with, trying to put together a list of, what could we cut? What we don't want to cut, what we don't want to sacrifice is anything that's going to be a deterrent to staff retention and academic performance. Those two things came kind of loud and clear, at least from my perspective, what I heard. Those two things we do not want to sacrifice. We've made so many great strides to put Prescott on top of the list when it comes to academic achievement, and I don't think the board is interested in taking backward steps for that. So the district administration is going to be tasked with trying to put together what we can cut. Obviously, we got to look at, if we don't have a referendum, what is it going to take to cover the gap? So there's going to be some deep cuts if we choose not to go to a referendum. Where I think it's going to go is probably right where everybody's talking. We're going to be somewhere in the middle where we're going to need to ask the public for money. The state clearly isn't giving us what we need, and they made that clear. Again, I said this last month, I'm going to say it again. They're making this a local decision. The state is choosing to put the burden on the local taxpayers and make the taxpayers decide what kind of education they want to provide in their community. So it's coming back to the local taxpayers to make that decision. That's where it's going. What we need to do is figure out what that gap looks like, how much we think we need, how much can we tighten the belt buckle, what do we need, what's fiscally doable, and when. And Rick, I know there's a slide about dates, and I just want to throw it out there because I think it's important to do, about just dates of potential referendums that if we were to do this, what are some dates that we would be looking at? And because this is what we're going to be talking about probably over the next 3 months.
Hey, Mike, real quick while he's open.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, with the fund balance, we have enough to cover this year's budget and still be within policy. When you say we can't for next year, we can't and remain in policy. But again, I would say because of the hard work of the district and the board and the board's previous, that doesn't mean that it's zero. It wouldn't be within policy. So
yeah, I think my expressions were at the workshop. We weren't as a board interested in covering another year of this type of expense. Maybe somewhere in
because that would mean going below policy,
right.
And policy's there for a reason. Policy's there for a really rainy day.
And I think we're required also, right, to have it at a certain level? Or is it recommended?
It's recommended, but we do have a policy.
Yep.
It is three-legged, and one of the things is that our safety net is the line of credit that you just approved.
Yeah.
We have not touched the line of credit the last 6 years. But part of having enough fund balance is to weather the delay in funding that occurs. And part of it is if we fall below 2,000 at the end of the year, or I'm sorry, 2 million, if we have to tap our line of credit, that is part of our policy that says, whoa, we don't have enough money in order to operate. And then it's about at least meeting our expenses for 3 months as the minimum. So it's those three things in tandem, and that's why the finance reports are so important every month that Sue and I will continue. Now that we have kind of the budget, we'll get the referendum in place, the levy in place, then we'll be able to kind of finalize our budget and have those printouts for you. And as up to date, we're already a quarter into the year.
Before we talk about this slide, I wanted to add too that I feel like this year is going to kind of feel like a mirage, right? Like it's not going to probably feel that different for people within the buildings or for our students or our community. But the reality is we're going to be tapping into about $1 million of our savings. It's a big deal. We've never done that since I've been on the board anyways. So people aren't going to feel it. Our experience is going to look the same because we've done a good job savings, but we are taking $1 million or close to it out of our savings, which is a really big deal. And so we aren't willing to do that the following year. We have to make adjustments because we don't see that the state is going to make a change down the road. And that's why we have to make some adjustments or go and ask for more support from the community.
So Rick, can you just walk us briefly through this? I mean, we're looking at 24, right?
Yep, and so the two X's, don't look there. Look at the column that says 2024. I had my graphic artist work on this all evening. Then we have, so basically there are specific dates. You can do it during primaries. You can do it during election dates and then the normal dates. The spring primary. In order to have it on the ballot for the spring primary, you would have to adopt and file a resolution by December 12th. That also means that Sue and I, who just finalized the current budget, would have to give you enough information so that you would know how much to ask. I'll leave it there. The next one is the spring general election. There are 2 board seats up on April. There will be an election, right? So in order to have a resolution on that ballot about an operating levy, you have to make that decision only a month later, January 23rd. The benefit of April is that you guarantee, if it's successful, it would definitely hit for next year's fiscal year, okay? Now this is where it gets a little bit more difficult. You can do an August primary. August is busy and people are on vacation and people are coming back to school. Whether or not we'd be able to we know that in 2016, when we did it in February, and it was during the basketball season, not everybody came out to vote. And so it does matter when you pick. Then there is the general election, and that is in November. We did have an hour-long conversation, Sue and I, with Baird. Interestingly enough, the general election for 2024, you could still have it count for your fiscal year, even though it's approved in November. It does require that you would submit 2 budgets to DPI. You would have to pass 2 different levies, and then depending on the outcome of the election, one would stand. So just know that how challenging it is to explain one budget and one levy. We would have to do 2. The communication also would have to be during what I would assume, just reading tea leaves, not guaranteed, but it could be contentious for the presidential election, just thinking. And we would have to get our message out to the community through that noise. And so you have some dates. You have February, you have April, and then you have August or November.
So I think the next, go ahead.
I got a quick question.
Yep.
So again, sorry for stating the obvious here. I think the problem with the fall general though, or the fall general election, is that we're 2 months into the school year, and at that point in time would be operating on fund balance that we know won't cover the entire year and still be above policy. So any type of cost avoidance or cost mitigation in the event of an unsuccessful referendum, we'd be at a serious disadvantage.
We'd be on fumes and in trouble. Yep.
Sorry,
That's
Mike,
accurate.
So I'm just going to say it. If we were to go, the likely date would probably be the spring general. If we were to try to do something, if we could get it lined up, if we knew exactly what the gap was, or give or take, obviously that's a lot of work for you guys, but we'd have to figure out what we need. Obviously there's tax tolerance implications. We need charts on that from Baird. There is, what if it doesn't pass? We need all that information kind of teed up and ready to go in a very, very short window here. That's what we're looking at. So I think, in the coming months, we'll be workshopping probably as we get information in from the administration.
I would be most interested in that date too, just thinking along Pat's line of thought, which is if it is unsuccessful, we've got to make some tough choices and we need some time for that.
So
and Rick, by the 23rd of January, because the resolution has to be, that's got to be a dialed in amount, right? We can't be up to, or it's got to be exact.
Yeah, there are different, St. Croix Central will be one of the districts that used a baseline, and then every subsequent year, they did have a slight increase, and it was tied to, I think, CPI or a fixed rate. So you could just say it's a flat amount, and I'm just, for illustration sake only, remember November 28th is the first time that Sue and Christine will be working with Baird to start looking at options for next year's budget. That's why I think the 12/12 is too soon. But as soon as we have that, it would be basically behoove us to be able to come back to you and give you the information that you would need. I'm just going to say, what happens if we're able to do cost containment and mitigation of $500,000 within the district, and we ask the community to pick up the other $500,000, right? Equal shares, we understand that's not ideal, but it is something that we've been forced to based on the legislation that has been lacking at Madison. And so, again, it could be any combination thereof, but I think we would be able to come back to you with some of that information and get it to you. So it could be a flat 500.
Yeah.
Or it could be a flat 500 with every 2 years it goes up slightly. Those are combinations that we could consider and also run by focus groups and things like that.
Rick, when would we be able to start looking at this? I mean, give or take, like, you think in November? Is that too early?
Or November 28th, is that one?
Well, that would be,
As I send in this levy stuff to the state and they approve it, I can actually send off our financial stuff to Baird and make an update so we can start projecting. The training is not going to occur till later unless we travel farther, which could be done as well.
We just cut our travel expenses also, we can't.
We should announce we're not doing the school board conference.
Just kidding. All right, so.
I have been somewhat previously trained, so I might be able to navigate it.
I think we'll wait to hear, when you guys are ready to present. We schedule something and go through it, and then hope that'll have to be probably a workshop, and then we'll try to tie it in to, one of the next two board meetings to vote.
And then Pat, you had asked, is it like an up to kind of question? And my experience, I think it is kind of like that, right? Like we try to get, let's say 500,000, but if we don't levy that how much,
Right.
then it isn't all taxed.
Right.
So it kind of is in a way, like it doesn't have to be perfect. It is like, this is what we think.
It can't
but
be
we
perfect,
could
but it
do
can't be
less.
too few.
We can't do,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
We can't levy more.
We don't want to be under.
Yep, yep.
All right.
Okay.
I think we're good. Should we move on?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item B, discussion on request for proposals to entertain to sell an estimate of 14.6 acres of the school district land on 1010 Dexter Street property. You wanted me to say that too?
yes, I
probably, right?
did, because, rumors start, I don't know where, and we just wanted to be clear that the property that we're talking about and what it is. Let me just put up also, this letter is currently on the Prescott Public School website under the school board, and it is with regards to anybody can see it, and it's a request for proposals. So how did we get here, right? The administration, was a specific individual in the community came and asked if there would ever be consideration of selling or being able to purchase a set of property that the Prescott Public Schools owns. We currently have no structure on this property. We currently do not use it with regards to any athletic development or future consideration with regards to a football field or a track. We do have cross-country. Again, this is a property that's closer to Jewell Street, behind 1010 Dexter First National Bank Park, and then behind the ravine, and it is not accessible from our property. There is a huge ravine. This is also part of what the city was talking about, crossing that for current housing development and where a bridge would be placed. We did have a closed session during the summer to kind of discuss this. I have also been, and people have reached out to purchase all of 1010 Dexter to put up solar fields. But because we use it, it isn't something I was going to bring to you, right? But this one was something that I thought was important for consideration. In that, and since then, we wanted to make sure that I was directed by the board that you wanted it to be a more open, competitive bidding process, that you didn't want it to be exclusive with just one individual. And so we had to do, and your policy dictates the steps that I have to take. The district does have the ability, when they have a decision about selling property, they can do it, but there is a policy and steps that have to be followed. I also had to reach out to our lawyers to make sure that we could draft a document that would be non-binding, but that would request for proposals to occur. We did a property search to make sure that there was any adjacent ownership that touched any part of the 14.6 acres. And the board directed me to say, at minimum, we need to reach out to any of those owners to notify them of this request for proposals in case they have interest. So you asked it to be expanded. Then on top of it, once that we knew that those letters were going out, there was nothing that would prohibit anybody else that might have an interest in this property. It is very unique in where it's located. There's not a lot of specific uses. It also, because of the pitch and elevation, for us, there would have to be able to get water and things like that. It's a wooded area, it's beautiful land, but it is something that may be useful to many people in the community. And so we did put up this letter under proposals, under school board, and it is available for anybody to see. In addition, the board wanted to make sure that this was broken out as a specific point of discussion, in that this is one area, if we were able to execute this, that would be dollars that would be invested then into next year's budget, right? So that we're looking at trying to mitigate the loss or use of fund balance so that we can bridge into fiscal year 25. So with that, I just wanted to make sure that anyone, basically, these are non-binding. We are asking for the letters of intent to be sent to us by November 13th. They will be opened at the same time. This was posted October 12th. I have it highlighted so I'd remember. And then just for an aerial view, this is kind of where it shows up. You can see the outline of kind of the Dexter Fields, and then where the ravine is behind that, and then it's the blue outline is the 14.6 acres.
All right. I asked Rick to put this one on just because I think now with the bid, the RFP going out, I wanted to make sure that we made this as transparent as possible so the public knows this is going on. I think it's important that the public knows that we're looking at this. Nothing has been etched in stone. Nothing's decided. We're exploring it at this point to see what kind of opportunities there are for selling it, and if there's interested parties. We know there's one because we were approached, and that's what kind of kick-started this in the summer. So, does anybody have anything to add here? Any comments here?
Maybe just this is in part of maybe what we were just talking about is trying to think outside the box, utilize the resources we have to put those dollars and invest assets where it matters most for the school. I would say that we also, I think, Dr. Spacuzza, we asked you to reach out to the city and make sure that any sale of this property, or I think future development for what it's zoned for, would not preclude the district from exercising anything within like the master plan, right? So building on any of our properties or further developing any of our, what we would call more usable properties, because in my humble opinion, this is unusable property for us. It would not stop us from doing anything from that regard. So I think that's important to
And I did reach out based on that directive and understood with regards to how it all is set up, the depth of the ravine, that there is nothing that would preclude us from doing or using kind of where the the cross-country track is. It was also, some of that area was identified as a future consideration for a building. Remember, there was a Site 1 and a Site 2 for the current high school. Again, nothing would inhibit based on, how the water, basically it was really about water.
Stormwater, yeah.
Stormwater, yeah.
And I do have a follow-up meeting scheduled at the end of this month to just kind of walk through and make sure. But the Cedar Corps is the primary overseer of that, and they do not see any challenges with that. Obviously, as we get closer, any RFP that is submitted, it is non-binding, and the district is not obligated to, it's crafted, right? And then you will work with the real estate lawyer from Well Riley.
Did you have a question?
No, I just want to reiterate that this piece of property, we can't build anything on it. The accessibility is really difficult. It's not currently being used, and it's an asset that we're basically just sitting on and aren't using. So, like Pat said, we're exploring everything. So as long as it's not impacting anything, I guess I don't see the need to hold on to it if we can.
I think you mean this, I know we're going, we could build something on it, but it's not, it's almost impossible to access it from school district property.
Yeah.
Is the problem. It's got like a 100-foot ravine in it.
Okay.
It's buildable, which is,
Which probably, I mean, we've got development going on the other side, and you've got everything.
I just want to make sure people understand that.
But we wouldn't be able to access it, so it really is of non-use, because that would cost us more in the long run to actually use that piece of property for anything.
Exactly, yep.
Okay.
Helen, anything?
No, same.
Tanya?
No, just I think this is just a really responsible use of our assets is for us to look at what we can do with this. We know we're in a budget crunch. It's an asset that we're not currently using, and we haven't made any decisions on whether we would sell this or not, but it's responsible of us to look and explore.
All right. Kenzie, anything? You gonna want to buy some land? No? All right. All right, we'll move on to item B. Wait, I got C, Vision 2035 update.
Why is there two Bs?
We got two Bs.
We got two Bs, yeah.
There should be a C.
To be, to see. Who's my quality control? CJ?
That's what happened. Don't interrupt her.
There we go. All right. So, as you know, we kicked off Vision 2035. Vision 2035 is not to wait to 2035 to make some of these changes. We are engaging the people that are closest to the things that we're talking about. It is a two-phase process. We are first looking at the academic learning environment. What are the things that enhance it, what elevates and engages students from space, large space, small space, lighting, furniture, that allows us to have more fluid continuum of instructional services. We engage students in August 22nd and also our staff. Next Wednesday, we are inviting a second group of students to participate. We've been working with that group of students that will be looking at their what their peers had already identified, and then to be able to start to look at from a different perspective of 30 students. Then on November 3rd, which is already scheduled Professional Development Day, our staff will be coming back. We are now going to start with they basically start to identify from the buildings that they're in, and remember, 50% of our staff are in a different building than they were a year ago, because we have done the grade reconfiguration at 1220, our middle school, and then also with regards to the intermediate down on 125 Elm. What we're going to start to talk about is things that they see as essential to be able to amplify or elevate their instruction, and what are some of the physical aspects that currently get in the way of our academic model. So it will not be completed, obviously, on November 3rd, but it is the start of a conversation about what in the building that you're in, what are some of the challenges you're faced with, and what recommendations or options do you see. And our goal is to start then to have information brought to the board from both a student perspective and a staff perspective, that then we can start to work with parents and families that are engaged in our buildings. Tonight's a really good example because we had parent-teacher conferences and parents were in buildings that have been invested in through our infrastructure work, but also getting to see how the classrooms are laid out and playing into a new setting. Then after we get past winter, we will start the conversation about our green space and activity space. So we'll look at all the activities from community ed, Prescott Community Rec, and our clubs and athletics to start looking at our indoor and green space and whether or not they are meeting the needs of the current teams and the current participation rates, and what, if anything, needs to be upgraded. So those dates are coming, and we'll be starting to kind of etch those out with regards to January, and February is when we're starting to look at having family participation. As our staff is currently on November 3rd going to be talking about features that they believe enhance our academic learning, what are the obstacles? Here are some examples. Every single building is going to have that conversation. The high school, even though it's new, they already know that there are some things that they may wish to redesign. Now that we have staff and students in the middle school, we have started to have conversations about where STEM is currently located in the old consumer family and consumer ed room. It was also Cardinal Corner, right? Mike Tomley is currently in there. He also uses G2, which is a computer lab, but he's starting to find that he's using G10 the most. So one of the questions is, we currently have our facility garage placed in there. It's under the roof that will be redone in the summer of '24. And it's $1.2 million to cover all of that space. Are there better ways to use that for academic learning? If that happens, how would we set that up? Then, well, how would you repurpose G2, which is a computer lab, and the current STEM room? We also have the overhang. The overhang can be for classrooms. It could be a unique place for STEM. It could be a place for a district office. You also have the wrestling room that had to be torn out because of the mezzanine and the water infiltration. That has a lot of square footage that could be redesigned. So there are spaces, not just in the middle school, but all buildings that could be repurposed or redesigned, not just for the current academic programs, but some future academic programs coming. And that will be kind of starting to plant the seed in November 3rd, but then in the subsequent meetings that are coming. Questions?
Rick, when are we going to see like a report on any of this?
We would like to have a report scheduled in December because we would have had 2 sessions both with students and staff.
Okay. Anybody have any questions here, comments?
Well, I got a comment. I think this could be, I mean, this is a sensitive topic based on all the stuff we were just talking about. And what I don't want, and I apologize, Dr. Spacuzza, if I'm not framing this up right, but what I don't want people to think is we're under this big budget deficit. We got potential referendums for cost mitigation discussions coming up, and now, boy, are we trying to redesign and look for new spaces. To me, though, this type of work is super important. It started 2 years ago when we started talking about long-term / master planning. This information allows us to make more and better educated decisions with how we spend money for one, and then how we continue to educate students. So I don't want people to think that we're having cost discussions and now we're going to redesign some spaces and be asking for more money. That ultimately could end up maybe being a part of it, but without the STEP information, we can't make those decisions.
Tanya?
Nope, thanks, Pat.
Vicki? Ellen? Kenzie? Pat, 100%. I mean, we're in an operational budget crisis. This process that we're doing now, we need to continue and finish and see it through. So this is, to your point, it's part of a master plan. Where do we want to be in 10 years? And so this work that we're doing right now is vitally important. It doesn't mean it has to happen in the next year or 2 years. It just, we need to get this information so we can set ourselves up for what we look like in the future. So, well said. All right, we're going to move on. Item C, update on public school academic performance, if I can
And
read.
with a grand entrance, Michael, are you going to cast or you want me to?
Yes, I'll just drive.
All right.
You guys still use thumb drives?
Well,
That's a clicker.
Oh.
For the fancy clicker. It's so he can drive.
Good evening, board.
Well, you're
All right.
coming off of parent-teacher conferences over at,
Yep, parent-teacher conferences. We had the book fair going on, sign-ups for wrestling club. We had a lot of activities going on today. But as usual, October is the time when I come to the school board and we talk about our academic performance from last spring. This performance is what we looked at during the August data dig, where for 2 days we had about 30 teachers and administrators across the district come together and look at this and then build site plans and goals from that data and what information did we gather from that. This just became unembargoed, I believe it was last week. So we're going to look at ours today, and then along with some comparisons to our neighboring districts that we always do. And then we have our initial report card. That's embargoed, but I'm hoping by by the next school board meeting in November, I'll be able to present to you on our report card of how do we shape up then in comparisons to the performance levels that the board or that the DPI believes we should be at, and then to our neighboring districts as well. So, without further ado, I'll get going here, I believe. There we go. If you were like many people with the last name Spikuza, you probably set your alarm on June 21st to wake up to hear the rollout of the national report card. I know he did because I got an email that day. But if you missed it, here are some of the headlines that came from those reports. And I just want to direct your attention to the board so you can see these because it's going to scroll through a bunch of headlines here. And what that last table at the bottom there really shows you is they're looking at 8th grade, and they're looking at the average score, and then to the right, you'll see it talks about the different percentiles. So the students that were in the 10th percentile, 25th, 50th, where they scored, and you can see every percentile is down, but the most significant drops were at the 10th and 25th percentile. They lost more than the students that were at the top.
And can I just interject? Because Michael did an incredible job after this came out. And I said, one of the things we discussed is what is the image, what is the message that's being publicized? And when you saw all those headlines, Michael went out and clipped all those. Those are not fictitious. These are headlines that are kind of bombarding our community. What I want to ask is, does that resonate with what you've heard or what you've seen with regards to academic performance? Does this take you by surprise, any of those headlines?
No.
All right. Now the rest of the story, or page 2.
Right, and oftentimes, it's still a line from Joe Sanfilippiano. He said, no one will change the way they talk about education until we change the way we talk about education. So those are the national headlines. That's what we hear on the nightly news. It's what we hear even on our local news sometimes. So the big question is well, what about Prescott? Where are we in comparison to those numbers? Are we part of those national trends? And last year, and this is last year's report card, 2022, the state, as a district, said that we exceed the expectations they put on us as a district. And those expectations oftentimes are linked to your free and reduced lunch population and your achievement versus your growth. In academic achievement, though, we were a top 11% in the state of Wisconsin. So if you line up all the school districts in the state of Wisconsin, we're standing at number 11 in line from the top. So we don't fit necessarily into that narrative of dropping achievement, low achievement. In the area, as you can see there, the only district higher than us in the entire area was Hudson. In the Middle Border Conference, we're the highest, and then just want to remind the board, we always compare to GET and Bloomer because demographically they are the most similar in western Wisconsin to us. And you can see where their percentile ranks are when they have the same expectations that we do. But as we look across all of our schools, our elementary was at the 93rd percentile, which was a gain of 4%. Our middle school is 86th percentile, they gained 11%. Even our high school in 2022 went up 4% and we're at 81 percentile. So overall, achievement across the district, very high. And then the other area that we look at is growth. And again, there's that's how the report card comes out, is you're based on those two, what percentile. And again, you can see of all the area districts, we are top 9% in growth. And that's not by mistake. That's because the board has invested in interventionists over the last couple of years. If we look even further, if we look at the elementary school, and 2 years ago, the board made an investment. We had a math interventionist added in the name of Corey Morning, and you can see our target group. So our target group is the bottom 25th percentile of our students that are in our schools. It gets determined by the year previous and how they did on the achievement scores. So that bottom 25th percentile typically is going to be a lot of your special education students and then your low regular education students. And how are we closing the gap for those students? That's what this is telling us. And it's telling us we're in the top 3% in the state at closing gaps for our lowest students, while we're in the top 9% as a district in closing gaps for all of our students.
And I just wanted to add, like, that is opposite of what those first slides, right? Like, the first slides had that the gap was increasing.
Growing. Yep.
And growing, and we were able to close that gap.
Right, and that was at the lowest achievement levels we've been at in the last decade, if not longer. That's the national narrative. But that's not what we're seeing here. How did Prescott respond last year? We didn't take a victory lap and say, oh, this is great. It is great. We celebrated it, but then we dug in, right? And we invested even more. We hired a math interventionist at the secondary level, Lindsay Wall, that goes between the middle school and the high school, because we saw that that was an area. Again, we're using our data, making informed decisions about all of our students. And thank you to the board for supporting that. So what does it really tell us about our schools? We're a high achieving district that does an outstanding job of growing all of our students and closing gaps. That's where we're at. And that's why when the board talked earlier about referendum and the fact that we have a deficit going into next year, being strategic on how will programming need to change to fill that gap as well. And we know that that's a reality. And on to this year. So this is our new data. This has been embargoed. Again, we've known about this data since early August when we shared it out with our PLC leadership team and the administrative team. One new thing from last year is that in grades 9 and 10, they now switch from the ACT Aspire to the pre-ACT. So when we get to those slides, you'll see I don't have any comparisons because, again, you typically want 2 or 3 years of data before you start making any sort of trend analysis on that. We always talk about two things, the attainment level and the growth. The general public, what people want to know is how good are our schools and are we getting any better? And when you look at both attainment and growth, we should be able to answer those two questions. And by the end of this slideshow, I'm sure we will be able to answer those two questions. So I'm going to start with our Wisconsin Forward exam. So this is given, this one's the ELA. And I just want to be clear, ELA is not reading. ELA is reading, writing, listening, conventions. All of that wrapped together into a score. Unlike some of our neighboring states that just assess reading. So part of our data literacy that we look at is what level do you need to be at in order to be considered proficient? Typical bell curve, you put 50th percentile. If you're higher than the 50th percentile, you're proficient. If you're lower than the 50th percentile, you're not. That's not what the state of Wisconsin does. As you can see in third grade, you have to be in the top 33% in the state, top third of students, in order to be considered proficient. Our numbers up here, Prescott is in the red for the last 3 years of data, and the state is in the blue. for the last 3 years of data. You can see that the state trend in most of the grade levels is going up. There are some where it does go down, but overall the state is trending slightly higher than in previous years. You can also look at what Prescott did. And again, we're looking at one cohort of students. So like in 3rd grade, we had 53% of our students proficient in ELA, 4th grade 52, 65, 58, 72 in 7th grade, and 58% in 8th grade. And I just want to point out that 8th grade class, because that has been the class that since they were in 3rd grade, we have been tracking. They have been the lowest performing class, but that's since 3rd grade, and that stayed true up until this year, where now they have sprung up to be the highest performing. And again, by intention, by the things that we do and the decisions that you make. Overall, Prescott, the last 3 years, you can see what we've been doing. 2021, 52% of our students grades 3 through 8 were proficient. We're now up to 60%. We are surpassed where we were pre-COVID. State has made some gains as well, up to 39% this year finally. So not quite to 40%, we're at 60%. Pretty large gap between us and the state average. And that's an expectation I think we all have, and we're working to meet those expectations. Next coming on are going to be some green arrows, and that's just following our cohorts from one grade level to the next. And the big thing here is just look at the shape of the arrow, and if it's upwards, it's positive growth, and if it's downwards, it's negative. And you can see one of our cohorts did lose 3%, which for us, that's probably 2 students. But overall, you can see again, our growth in most of our cohorts is up from the previous year.
And you brought up that we were targeting that 8th grade group, and it looks like they had the most growth.
Yes, they had the most growth of any group. The other part is where this 3% loss is. You also have to see here that if you were at the 60th percentile, you make a year's growth in a year's time, you are no longer proficient. So the way that the state sets up the exam also is a growth model. They don't want us to be complacent and say, well, if we get 50% of our kids, that's proficient, that's not. The other part that I think confuses people sometimes is just that definition of proficiency. And we spend a lot of time with our PLC leaders talking about that. It's proficiency does not mean grade level. In the general public, Prescott word of mouth, you'll hear people use those words with each other. They are not. Even the state says, even if you are basic, basic means you can do grade level work. You just can't do it at the same depth of knowledge as people who are proficient or advanced. So I just wanted to make sure people were clear of that as well. So that's our ELA. Again, trend is up. 60% of our kids, highest percentile we've ever been at. If we look at mathematics, again, proficiency levels here change quite rapidly. 53rd percentile to 57th. So you're jumping 4 percentile ranks. But by the time you are in 8th grade, you have to be in the top 30% of kids in the state of Wisconsin to be considered proficient. So you're going to expect that we're going to get less students proficient. And you can see the state, 31% of the kids are proficient, which aligns exactly with 70th percentile. Again, red is Prescott, and blue is the state. You can see our 3rd grade coming in as we're getting more and more students who were younger when COVID hit and we had masks and online learning. We can see that those kids are coming in lower to us, but you can see that in 4th grade we have a large bounce back, and then they continue to grow in 5th grade. You can see there's a pretty significant jump from 5th grade to 6th grade, and then we do see the numbers come back down, but again, part of that's related to the expectations and where those are set. But as you can see, over the last 3 years in 6th grade, now that we have some stability, we finally are getting around to illustrative math and what does it mean. Students are coming from 5th grade having illustrative math. We're now seeing those gains here. And again, that 8th grade group, 42 percentile, that's still one of the highest percentiles we've had in the last, ever since 2016 when we started the forward exam. So that group, again, had quite significant growth. Overall, we were 50th percentile coming out of COVID. 50% of our kids were proficient. We're up to 63% of our kids proficient. Again, our report cards show that. It's going to be those kids that were in that bottom quartile that are now being bumped up into proficiency. Overall, the state, still relatively low, 42% of kids proficient in mathematics. Yes, it's grown, but again, still that significant gap between us and the state. And then as we look at our cohorts again, look at the slope of the line. And again, that will tell you what our cohorts did. So even that 8th grade group, you can see 43% proficient, now 42, so one student. And again, you made a year's growth in a year's time, probably where we lost that student. But again, that's that target group that we've been targeting for years and getting them to where they need to be successful in high school. Any questions on the forward exam before we switch to secondary or at the high school level? Kenzie, nothing? All right. ACT, right? Sometimes referred to as the golden ticket. Kind of gives students a real good gut check of where they are and if they need to, areas where they need to work harder and areas where it might be a little bit easier for them. As you can see, we're in red again, states in blue. That's the composite score. This is what was predicted by the ACT Aspire the year previous, that we would have our lowest group, and they performed the way that it was predicted they would perform. They did not overachieve in any way. They're right where they should have been, and we knew that that group was there. So it's one of our lowest groups, but again, still above the state average. As we look at percent that are proficient, so 9th grade, 10th grade, those are the pre-ACT, are in these two grades. That's why I don't have any other years here. But in grade 11, this is the ACT. Again, Prescott is in red, and in blue is the state. You can see one of our letter numbers there should have been red. That 50 actually goes with us last year. So 50% of our students were proficient in ELA. And again, this combines the conventions part along with the reading and the writing that goes into the ACT. Again, percentile in order to be considered proficient. On that higher end, it's not the 50th percentile. The state is higher than that. It requires us to be higher than that in order to be considered proficient. And again, there isn't a lot of trend data to go with that. But overall, Prescott, 54% of our students at the high school level are proficient or considered proficient in ELA, where the state's at 39%. And that was ELA. Mathematics, again, very similar. Percentile rank, again, you got to be in the 68th percentile in order to be considered proficient. We're down in 9th grade, 59th percentile, so there's quite a bit of growth. They're still expecting kids to be growing throughout high school. Prescott's at 42% overall, where the state's at 32%, so not quite the same gap that we had in the other one, but still a significant gap there as well. Again, we will have more data next year when we do the pre-ACT numerous years in a row. Right now, we just don't have that. Advanced placement at the high school is one of our bright spots. We have a lot of advanced placement courses for a district our size. We have a lot of kids participating in those advanced placement scores. And as you can see, our numbers only continue to grow up with the number of kids that are earning college credit. We're at 72% of our kids who sit for the exam. And we have more kids sitting for the exam than we ever have, partially because of a policy change with AP, where students sign up in the fall for the AP exam rather than signing up in the spring. And that just kind of holds their feet to the fire all year long to continue learning because they know they have this exam waiting for them at the end versus, well, let's see if I'm ready for the exam in the spring and then I'll make the decision if I'm going to take it or not. That comes out to 335 credits that were earned by our students last year. That's over $110,000 of savings for our families. And that's at the CVTC at the intro level of a UW school, or of a UW system school. So $110,000 is what our families were able to save because of AP. So thank you to the teachers that continue to provide those classes and go for the training. And I know Rob Glazebrook was able to talk Tanya Sponholtz into going and doing the reading and the grading. It's a one full week. You get 1 day of training and then you just grade. One thing that they said coming out of that is, the AP is a number of questions. You grade one question over and over and over again. So it gets tedious, but one thing they've been able to come back and talk to our students about, where can you squeeze out those extra points that are going to give you that 3 versus what are some things that maybe you can ignore. So it's been helpful for those classes, and we see that in the results as well. And now the fun part, comparison. Where do we compare to our neighboring districts? I want to thank Kathy Miller for helping me mine all this data the day after it came out last week. So it's going to DPI's Wise-Public. Anyone can go and do this. You go to each grade level, you select the topic, you select the year, and then you write that number down, and then you got to start all over and refilter everything for the next grade level. But we did that. We went through one of the areas, Prescott's in green, and then you'll see again those same comparison districts around your Hudson and River Falls. I highlighted because they're not in our conference necessarily. GT and Bloomers down at the bottom. The color coding is this: Prescott's in green. Anyone who's equivalent to Prescott is also green. If their score was lower than Prescott, they're in yellow. If it's higher than Prescott, they're in blue. And as you can see, there's a lot of yellow and not a lot of blue. Of all the instances on this table of comparison, 90% of the time, Prescott is higher than our comparative neighbors around us in terms of our academic performance, both at the ELA, again, grades 3 through 8 that we just saw, and then the pre-ACT and ACT 11 up at the high school level. And the state is just is down at the bottom. Their numbers are down at the bottom again. So that's the ELA comparison, and our math is slightly different. A little bit more blue on this, a little bit more green on that pre-ACT where they're matching our scores, but still 85% of the time of our comparisons, Prescott is higher than our comparison neighbors in the Middle Border Conference. As I started the presentation, next month I'll be coming back to you and we'll be talking about the report card. So I'll foreshadow that at the end here, but all that data that we just looked at is what loads to the report card. And as you can see, we are higher than we have been. K-8, I'm not quite sure at the high school because there's no quite comparison. But overall, I think on the report card again, I think we're gonna look pretty good because of our high achievement. And then again, knowing what we know about our gaps and the way that we attacked those with our interventionists last year. So I'm excited to come back next month to show you that. The other part that we do talk about, part of our data that maybe the softer side or the side that isn't just numbers, it's also people. So we do a survey at the end of the year for our climate and culture. We had 146 staff fill this out. That's the most we've ever had fill out our climate and culture. Previous year was 104. So about 40 more staff filled it out. It's asked of every staff from the bus drivers, the cooks, the front office, our aides, everyone participates in this. And this is sort of our district summary. These are our strengths or areas where, and again, what's happening here is the color coding goes to this key. If you strongly agreed, you're in purple. If you agreed and you're in yellow. If you disagreed, you're in, in green is agree. Yellow is the disagree, and then you got the strongly and if you don't know. It's kind of hard to see. There is some red banding here of strongly disagrees. The other thing is that these bars are the average score. So for question number 1, the amount of work I'm asked to do is reasonable and manageable. We're right at 4 is our average score, and 4 would be an agree. So that's what the bars mean. So you can see our highest one is number 4. Our staff does a good job of educating our students. Pat.
Was this licensed staff or is this all staff?
All staff.
All staff, okay.
Yep, this is all staff. At the data dig, the principals, we do get our individual buildings, and then we do toggle on and off licensed versus non-licensed, aides and things like that, because some of the questions are about communication and being part of conversations or making decisions, and are there groups that feel like they're not getting enough communication or that they're not involved enough. Yep, so we do desegregate the data as well. So these are our areas of strength. I feel safe at work. I have healthy working relationships with my colleagues. I'm comfortable sharing my input and concerns with my supervisor. I feel supported by my supervisor in making decisions. Our staff, again, does a good job. Most days I look forward to coming to work, which is great. You always want workers who want to come to work. Have that healthy working relationship. And again, all students at our schools are given equal opportunities to learn and experience success. So those were our successes. And like all good organizations, we have to look at the brutal facts and also look at where are our areas of most need. So these are our areas that averaged under 3. So again, same key here. Here are strongly agrees. So we did have people that strongly agreed with these. We had people that agreed, but then we have our disagree. You can see the red line a little bit more here of our strongly disagree. All 4 of these are the exact same 4 as last year, but all 4 of them had growth also, where the number got closer to 3. So that was a good thing. The other thing that we talked about, and it's sort of like how do we solve this one here? I know all buildings, this was ours across every building. The staff handles student discipline in a consistent manner. And I know a number of the buildings we talked about defining that a little bit more, what we mean. I know at the intermediate school, we're trying to coach people to answer that question as in common spaces. Because we have aides that go across different classrooms. They're going to see different approaches to your classroom management. We don't want to micromanage that. But common expectations when we're in the hall, when we're in the cafeteria, when we're at an assembly. So that's one of the things we looked at is in common spaces, how do we feel versus in individual classrooms? Because we all have perceptions of what happens down the hallway, but we don't necessarily know. Some of the aides know because they're in different classrooms as well. So we definitely do desegregate the data there and see what do our aides say. And that's probably where we see the most disagreement. Again, because they're seeing all these different personalities and styles. And yeah, so the buildings are continuing to work on that as well. And I know the board, you guys have made commitments, and you've even made commitments tonight about district pay practices are fair. That's one of the lower ones. You guys have made movement on that last year, and you continue to talk about that this year. So again, like all organizations, we don't turn away from this. This is part of us, and these are just their areas where we can grow. And now the fun part, upcoming report card. Rick said, keep it short, so 2 slides. First slide is no big changes. So 4 priority areas, achievement, growth, target group, again, that lowest 25th percentile, and on track to graduation. This is not our data, this is just an example. So we're gonna see that again this year. And then the only other part is, again, that weighted calculation based on our free and reduced lunch numbers. So as a district, our achievement is counting for about 37%, where our growth is only 13%. And we have a lot of good growth, but we don't get as much credit as, say, our neighboring district, Ellsworth, who's at 40% free and reduced lunch. They get more credit for their growth, less credit for their achievement. And you can see the free and reduced lunch numbers at the other buildings that then slightly change the pie wedges a little bit. And then down at the high school, that target group and their on track to graduation is a little bit different than what we have here, because there's graduation at high school. At the elementary and middle school, there's attendance and habitual truancy, and those are the areas that we look at there. So next month, I've been told it will be embargoed. We'll have our final version. Right now, the state has a 2-week inquiry period if we believe there's something wrong with our data or something wrong with our report cards, which last year I did file an inquiry, and they did fix what was wrong. This year, everything looks kosher. So next week, I'm hopefully getting a final one, and then next board meeting, it'll be public, and I can present it to you. What questions do we have?
Vicki, you have any questions?
No, I think it's looking good. Thanks.
Helen?
No questions.
Kenzie, anything?
Not really a question, but I would just say as a student, it's really almost uplifting to see this, uplifting to see like the success throughout the school, especially like I know that I'm in those numbers and I'm like showing that progression too, especially going into college and like everyone talking about like comparing with the other schools in the state and Madison and wanting to go to the big schools, right? So it's just really nice to see how much the school district cares about it and the effort put behind it. It's nice.
Yeah, thank you. Well said. Tanya?
This is just more of a thought, but I often wonder about our ACT scores and wonder how much because it used to be something that we didn't use for schools at all, really, right? And it was all just about college entrance and all, are you ready for college and stuff? And now schools are using it, and now colleges are using it less, and now schools are. And I just wonder sometimes the effort and the drive that goes into those really long, grueling ACTs when like the shift is really turned. So not really something we can probably show in our numbers, but a shift.
Yep.
No, this is great. This is such cool and fun and
You should join us for the
celebratory type
16
information.
hours that the PLC leaders.
Oh, they say it's fun too, I think.
I mean, it's the end result of some hard work and some great news, and we should all be really, really excited about this. I appreciate your passion. I think it's a passion, right, for the data and the numbers, and I'm sure the rest of the administrators and teachers who work on this stuff. This is great thing. So looking forward to next month as well.
The fact that I understand it tells me that you did a really good job. Because this is, I mean, I get your color-coded slides here, so well done on presenting the data to us in a way that we can actually unpack it ourselves. And I mean, yeah, it's a great story. I mean, we're doing really well, but this is exactly what we were talking about. We want to keep the momentum going. We don't want to take steps backwards in this time frame, because we have done a lot of good things, and you pointed it out. Thank you for pointing out some of those things, Michael. But really, yeah, great job. Thank you.
So Michael, and also just by way of Kathy, I know that's a lot of information. It's a lot of time that goes into it, but the two slides here, the color codes the information and makes a comparison, I think is a really great way to synthesize a lot of information in a very short period of time. And so just thank you for thinking about the presentation and also how the information can be used. So to the colleagues, the administrators, and to our staff working with our students, job well done, and we'll continue to improve. And we have some areas that have been identified.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks. Thank you.
And Andrew's been waiting all night. We're going to move on finally to
night.
item D, image and likeness.
Name, image,
Name, image, and likeness.
Okay. I don't have as much color in mine, so I apologize.
Did he give you the clickers?
No, cool, Charles.
So I'm just gonna, this is a new topic that's starting to come up. I want to give you an update on where we are. The state of Wisconsin is starting to venture down the path of allowing name, image, and likeness profiting for high school athletics. Just a reminder, in the current rule, current bylaws do not allow student athletes in Wisconsin at the high school level to profit off their name, image, and likeness. It's commonly referred to as amateurism. If they do, their eligibility is lost completely, and schools can reapply for reinstatement. That is unchanged at this point, so I want to make sure that's clear as we go through this. However, we are starting to talk about possible changes that will allow it. Language on a rule change has not been necessarily finalized, but we are moving forward closer to approving the possibility of a vote of the membership in April of 2024 to allow it in the state of Wisconsin. There are more states now in the nation than not that allow high school athletes to profit, including all of Wisconsin's neighbors. Language in a provision, or language will likely include a provision that would prohibit the school district and school district actors from any involvement that is going to be consistent with other states. What does that mean? It can mean an athlete can profit as being a basketball athlete, but not a Prescott basketball athlete. They can wear a basketball jersey, but not a Prescott jersey. And then the district's name, image, and likeness cannot be used. The student's going to have to be able to profit off of their own without being propped up by the school district. Education for parents and students is going to be very important, and that's something that is going to be an emphasis for us in the membership to make sure that we're providing the proper education. So what exactly are we talking about? So name, image, and likeness. First, the N is for name. Michael Jordan, that's pretty easy. It's your name. Image is going to be a picture. Anything that represents you, your action shot, headshot, and then likeness is going to be really all the other things. These are common. Video games. This is kind of where it's all started with the O'Bannon case at the collegiate level. So this is really what we're talking about around the individual person. So high school student athletes in Wisconsin would then be permitted to earn compensation from their persona rights, which is their intellectual property rights within their name, image, and likeness, which is currently not allowed. If that passes, it will likely begin to be permitted next summer. So at the high school level, it's going to be very different than the collegiate level. So Advance is a company that WIA is licensed with, contract with to help us move through this. And in their presentation to us, these are their main topics of education that they want to put forward to families. It's going to be financial literacy, goal setting, critical thinking, and then for parents, budgeting, saving, taxes, and who to trust. Who to trust is going to be one of the big ones. Education is, like I said, is going to be our #1 goal. NFHS, which is the National Federation of High School Sports, is going to partner with Advance to offer an online course that parents and students can go to as well. Advance is also going to offer an app. ADs are going to get complimentary access to the app. It's going to be, again, a point of emphasis to push this out to our stakeholders, and the app's going to include e-learning opportunities, courses, modules, quizzes that families can tap into. All right, clicker stopped working.
Yep.
Try again.
Okay, so impact on Prescott. So one small town impact. What this means is our perceptions of name, image, and likeness are this is only going to impact a couple of people, only impact a couple of sports. What we have been necessarily notified or warned almost at the small town level is that this is going to impact everyone. It's not just an impact high profile, and that's because small towns have different relationship dynamics than larger communities. So every athlete is essentially a candidate. So it's important for us when we put education materials out, that it's being pushed out to everyone, not necessarily those that have the perceived ability to benefit versus all. Biggest risk to families is going to be incompetent, ignorant, and predatory third parties. And one thing that we were also made sure to understand is that that's not always intentional. And so in small towns, you have businesses that aren't necessarily experienced in writing these kind of contracts. So it's going to be important that families do their homework, do their research, and ensure that any contract they're signing is in their best interest and not sign something that is going to be damaging them long term. So on the education side, we're going to be focusing on these 3 areas. One, what is allowed and what is not allowed under WIA rules. We are not going to get into the what is a good business decision. Coaches are going to be educated on what their roles are and what they need to stay away from. And also education to businesses so they understand what the rules are. Many states are writing in rules that if NIL is used to prompt a transfer, that student is ineligible permanently and will never get it back again, and schools will likely be penalized if that's the case. So it's important businesses know you can't go to other communities to entice a transfer to Prescott because they're going to get a contract for it. That's likely not going to be allowed. I know Minnesota wrote that into their rules. So recommendations for us as we start to head down this path. 1, if the WIA permits it, I recommend that Prescott allow it. If we were to block it, that could potentially send students out of our district to other districts, and that's not something that we would want to do. It's also going to be recommended that we have a new board policy. So that policy would then flow into the activities code, and then I would update our coaches handbook. The reason a board policy is recommended is because it should prohibit all Prescott School District staff and coaches from any involvement in advising, negotiating, or executing an NIL contract, because it puts the district in liability risk if they sign a bad contract. That's why it's going to be important for us as coaches and athletics personnel specifically to ensure we are staying away from that. That's why district's name, image, and likeness will likely not be allowed to be used. It protects the district from potential liability. So it's not going to be our job to advise a family on a good or bad business deal as much as you might want to. It's going to be, is it allowed within the framework of the rules, yes or no? That's why this is a really new dynamic. It's a rule change that really doesn't impact us. It just allows people to do things outside of our control and our influence, and that's going to be uncomfortable at times, and it's going to be so new and frankly a little chaotic, especially at first across the state. So I do believe we're gonna go down this path. That's why I'm coming to you now to start saying the framework, because next summer we may have families starting to sign these contracts with businesses, whether locally or not locally. So that's what I have for you today. This is an ongoing conversation that we will get more clarity on in the coming months, but come April, we'll most likely take a vote, and it will probably pass, but we're still working on getting language drafted. So happy to answer any questions that you have right now around this.
Anybody have any questions?
No, thank you.
No? I'm glad to see that WIA is finally taking care of this 30 years after Pat Block graduated and profited off of his baby. Like this when he was in high school, so. All right.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Andrew.
Andrew, thank you.
We'll move on. Item 8 is recognition of visitors. Is there anybody that would care to be recognized? Come on up to the podium and state your name. Thanks for sticking around. If you would have got here earlier.
We do this at the beginning, too. Who's he?
Mr. Ryan.
Never believe Mr. Ryan. No, I'm just kidding. All right.
Okay. So
Name?
my name is Zoe Anthony, and we are here in replacement of Mr. Ryan to talk about the Lac du Flambeau trip. So yeah, that's what we're doing.
All right.
We're supposed to have a presentation, but I don't know if that's here.
Yeah. Did you send it to us?
He might have.
Courtney, are you aware?
Mr. Ryan.
He's so
Mr.
silly.
Jeffrey. Well, we'll just invite him back next month, and he can come at 7 and share the presentation.
I did appreciate the card, but do you want to just share a little bit? It was last weekend, right?
Yes.
Okay, do you guys want to just explain how long you were there, what events you got to participate in?
So we were there for 4 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then we left on Sunday. And Popcorn Alley.
So basically, we got to like experience a reservation like firsthand and get to see a bunch of different point of views of people living on the reservation and see what life is like for them. We got to visit Lakeland High School, which was really cool to see Native students in a high school. What else did we do? We got to see like a drum. There you go. You can just like, yeah. So
Keep talking, yep.
we got to see a drum circle, which was really, really cool. Because there's a picture of it somewhere. It was a really awesome experience. There it is. To see like their culture in a different light. Because like I've heard about drum circles before, but it was really cool getting to like feel the beat in your body as they talk about like it's the heartbeat. It's really loud.
Really loud.
And we got to see a little 5-year-old also dance while his family was playing. So that was cool.
As you can see here, we were also helping out with the community. So we were sorting wild rice. The wild rice that we were sorting, the longest grains were going to be shared out to the elders. Hello. Sorry. We were also just doing, it's somewhere up here soon. We were also doing just community service for our hosts, which was the Broken Boat Campground, because we were staying after their closing, which was really kind of them. Yeah, there it is. We were moving picnic tables for them. So, yeah, I don't know. We thought it was all really fun. Is there anything else we need to touch on?
You guys like Tommy's awesome.
We also had a lot of conversations. Like this is one where we just sat in circles and people told us their experiences, how they feel about living on the reservation, very different aspects of their culture, which was very unique and a great experience, and we wouldn't give it up for the world. So thank you guys for allowing us to go. Thank you for making it such an accessible trip. We really can't thank you enough for that. So, yeah.
All right.
Any questions?
Fantastic.
Thanks for hanging out all night with us.
You make sure Mr. Ryan knows our meetings start at 6 o'clock though, not 7.
Yeah.
We would have been here.
It used to start at 7.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well done, and thank you to Mr. Ryan, who continues to champion and lead that trip for many individuals and community members.
All right, anybody else? All right, we can move on. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, that carries. Thank you, everyone.